Hi guys, hi everyone. Hi Chris, a very warm welcome. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you.
Chris Ramsay, member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE.
Yeah,
We're
very fortunate. Very
we're
fortunate.
we're delighted to have you and welcome to our regular guests as well. I can see Asif and Elliot, along with Colin and his team of coaches from just outside of Boston, USA. So a very warm welcome to everyone. And yeah, thanks again, Chris, for joining us. I know it's a busy time for yourself, but let's get straight into it, shall we? And if you can just let us know, for those who don't know, what your current role is in the game.
My current role is I'm the technical director and head of coaching at Queen's Park Rangers. It's quite a unique role, probably worldwide, because like today we've been back coaching. The first team is back in, so I work with the first team in the mornings, and I might work with the under 18s or the under 23s in the afternoon, and then I work with the under 9s in the evening. So I'm probably one of the only people that know every player in the club and work with every player in the club. So it's a very fortunate job. But Les Ferdinand, he's a visionary, and he's put me in a position where I can work with everybody in the club.
Brilliant. We want to talk about your coaching pathway, Chris, but let's wind it all the way back to where it started for you as a player down in Bristol, I believe.
Yeah, I was funny enough. I was at Arsenal and Charlton as a schoolboy. Didn't get my scholarship, but I ended up going to Bristol City. Bristol City, back in those days, they were in the Premier League with Norman Hunter and people like that playing for them. But I got, I had quite a lot of disappointment when I was a kid, because I got released from there. Didn't get my pro contract. In those days, you had to write a letter to get a trial. So you'd be writing letters, and then you have to wait for it to come back. Went to Brighton, and I managed to get a pro contract there. And it's funny how things are. I got released from Bristol in the end of the season, and by November I was in the first team squad at Brighton. Ended up making my debut at the end of that season. So so I did that. I was there for nearly 5 years. I had a lot of injuries. 6 or 7 operations. Fortunate enough to play in what is the Premiership now, what was the First Division then. I managed to play in the cup final for Brighton against Manchester United. But I ended up going on loan to Swindon, and eventually signed for them. They were in what would be League Two now, so it was a drastic move. But I was captain there for a little while. We got 2 or 3 promotions, and then I moved from there to Southend. I was involved in 2 promotions there, and I'd left in one the year, the first at Swindon. I ended up going to Southend. Things didn't work out there. Was injured for 2 years. Had the 3 back operations.
Wow.
Stopped playing really during it for a period of time. I ended up doing some business outside football, which was unsuccessful. So I had to go back and play football. Couldn't find anything in this country because I was medically retired, really. So I went and played in Malta for 3 years, and that's where my coaching started. In Malta. So that was my playing career. It was very, very average. 6 to 7 out of 10 ham and eggs player.
Chris, what sort of coaches in that era, thinking about the clubs that you've been at now, might have inspired you on your sort of journey to become a coach?
When I was a player?
Yeah.
No, I didn't want to be a coach. I didn't really want to be one, to be honest with you. I could never think of anything worse than being a coach. So I was fortunate that when I played in Malta, basically I was one of the foreign players, and the manager got the sack. And because I was on the most money, they said you're going to have to be the coach. So I started being the coach, and then fortunately we got promoted. And they just said you got to keep doing it, and I ended up being a player manager, which is actually the worst job you can have, because it'd be like coaching yourself, and you're not doing what you're telling the others to do. and you're held accountable because you're actually on the pitch, not doing the plan. So it's very, very difficult. But on the other hand, you can influence the plan as well on the pitch.
How would you have described your coaching style back then, Chris? Being like a rookie coach, going in as a player coach.
My coaching style was if I look back now, I probably wasn't very good, but you try and take a lot of the stuff that you had learned from other coaches. And one of the coaches that I had, I mean, most of my coaches were old school sort of coaches back in those days, because most of the coaching in those days was quite autocratic. But I had a very good youth coach at Bristol City called Jerry Sharp, and he took time with players, and he was good. And then there was a coach at Brighton called Brian Eastick, who's now used to work at the FA, and he was quite innovative back in those days with people like John Cartwright. Because while I was at Bristol City, I ended up I was in the England under-20 squad, and John Cartwright was the manager, and I learned a lot indirectly from those in my coaching style. But generally, people were quite autocratic in and around that. When I was at Charlton, there was a guy called Roy Passy, and he was really a really good youth coach. I was there with like the likes of Paul Elliott and Paul Walsh back in those days, and he was really good. But I tend to find that as soon as you leave youth football, people don't coach as much.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot. I learned a lot from Roy. Roy was very direct. And John Cartwright and Brian Eastick were very creative, very, very good.
Yeah. So it kind of leads me on to modern day then, and sort of what would you say were some of the fundamental differences from when you first got into coaching as that sort of player coach role in Malta versus where you are now, your current role as technical director?
No, I was always influenced by one of the first World Cups that I saw. I mean, obviously, the first one I saw was Brazil versus Italy. It was the first colour one, I think it was. But I was very young. But it was Beckenbauer versus Cruyff in the 1974 World Cup final. So you had the total movement, and that's my first love of that type of football. And I watched that final on YouTube all the time. And it was my first sort of embracing of that total football, and then you had Beckenbauer, who was a very, very outstanding defending midfielder that played in defence. So that was my first major influence on looking how football should be played, or how I feel football should be played. And so it was back then, and I've took that with me since then, really, of the different influences, so influenced by Arsenal 1971, Charlie George, George Armstrong, winger, people like that. And then you looked at the Colombian team with Valderrama in it, who's actually probably one of my favourite midfield players. So you look at that, and then obviously the Dutch teams with Bergkamp in it, and so my philosophy is quite a mash of different styles of play.
But do you think? Well, I'm pretty sure I noticed this, but personally, your coaching style, your way of coaching has evolved from that time, and if so, how has it? So I look back at when I was first coached at sort of non-league level, and it was very constant practices, very stop, stand still, no room really for freedom or free expression. You certainly were looked on, I think, as a player first, rather than a person. So it'd just be interested to know how that's evolved for you over the years.
It depends because I work on both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, on a Saturday morning, I could be working with Paul Furlong with the under-18s.
Yeah.
And then we finish that, and I drive straight to the first team match. So we're talking about we're talking about experimentation, where you're allowing players to express themselves, and then within 2 hours, I'm making sure people stick to their tasks listen, I don't take the team. Mark takes the team, but I make a contribution because I sit with the analyst and hopefully him and John Eustace's strategy comes to fruition. So it's not my strategy, so I'm making sure by telling them, where we could improve. So my coaching, my basically, when I look at my development coaching style, it's slightly different to the first team, and obviously when you're looking at first team, you're looking at capabilities of players. Basically, the philosophy that we work on is a capability-based, strength-based, capability-based idea. So we don't really work on the much weaknesses of the players unless it stops them from progressing. So we're not going to just work on everything they can't do. Most of everything that we work on what they can do. And
so strengths, super strengths.
We work on that. But don't get me wrong, if there are things in a game that are fundamental to stop you moving forward, then we'll work on it. But I'm not going to work on the wing clearing the ball from a header. I'm not wasting my time doing that. I'm not doing that. Whereas a lot of people say, well, he can't track back and he can't do this. But I'm saying, but he can beat three and cross it, or he can shoot and he can score. So what's your balance? Yeah.
That was that famous story with Lionel Messi, wasn't it? That not sure he's going to be a player because he can't use his right foot.
Well, that's
how that turned out.
That's another thing that people say about, you've got to be able to use both feet. I don't agree. I don't totally agree with that. I think the younger they are, the easier it is to teach them to be both-footed. But I think if you can be both-sided, so you can open up on your furthest foot, and then you can use your wand if you have got one, or you can use your best foot. It's better two-sided rather than two-footed. Two-footed is a luxury, and if you can do it, brilliant. But how many world-class players are two-footed?
Yeah, I just wonder if that was a default setting with some sort of. I'm looking at the foundation phase and grassroots coaches, and I always revert back to myself as that young 8-year-old player that didn't really understand this sort of jargon and terminology that coaches were shouting at me from the sides. And then the default would always be things like, you've got to use your left foot. Yeah, but can you do it on your left foot? And right, now we're going to go one touch. So I like to think of myself, I used to play out wide and as a creative player, but that really nullified me, I felt, growing up, because it was just this default of one touch. So I wasn't allowed to go and take players on and express myself because I had to do and conform for what the coach said. So it was just interesting getting that balance with someone like yourself who's worked across, the whole sort of complete spectrum of the game, if you like. And I just wonder, I only played sort of semi-pro, but in that environment, I think we would have probably wanted to be told what to do rather than lots of questions asked at us. I don't know what you think of that.
I think it depends. If you've got young 8-year-olds, what you have to look at what the characteristics of a young player is, a young person.
Yeah.
So you go and watch in the school playground, they'll all just run around the ball. So so you have to embrace that and to make them play one touch. The best players play one touch because they can manipulate the ball. So the better you are on the ball, the easier it is to play with less touches. So people get it the wrong way around. You play one touch. Well, playing one touch is actually quite hard.
Yeah.
So if you need touches on the ball, then you need to work on being comfortable on the ball. Then you can choose the touches. A lot of the times people say with young kids, I'll play one touch. But I think that's totally wrong. I think ball manipulation, ball comfort is the main thing that a young player needs. Then they can choose. Give them as many tools as you can, and then they can choose. And then the decision making becomes more apparent. With the more tools that they've got, the decision making becomes better.
Yeah, no, I agree. You obviously have a set way of playing in your current role, and I don't expect you to sort of divulge all your sort of top secrets and everything, but just again, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but do you give your players sort of player ownership and a say in strategies and tactics and maybe individual goal setting and things like that, unit setting, goals?
Depends where they are on the continuum. It depends where they are on the pyramid, and it depends how good they are. Because in the end, you can give if they haven't got a level of talent that you first have to teach them the things that they need to know. Now within that, there can be some collaboration. Of course, they can, but at the end of the day, I work at a pro club, and my job is to get players into the first team. That's the job of it. So a lot of the times we have a lot of this kumbaya coaching where we ask a million questions and we do a lot of guided discovery. And although that has a place, but in the end, the player has to know what their task is and what they have to do. Yeah. So we can all be innovative with, well, what did you think you should do? And what do you do? If they knew they would have done it. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes we without being over autocratic, you have to guide the player. You have to guide the player. The player doesn't guide himself. The player doesn't know. Otherwise, he would be the coach. Yeah. So we work on the zone of proximal development with the players. So first of all, we don't coach them at things that we believe that in their age group they're quite experts at. So what we do is we let them practice that, and if we can guide them onto another level, then we do. But what we don't do is if someone's quite good at something, we let them keep working at it and get better at that thing. Yeah. But what we try to do is guide the player to the next level. And if the player can be guided, can self-guide, and we can push him along the way, and we can see him going that way, then we'll let him do it. Most players can't. Most players can't. They can't at the level that we would want them to do it, and the speed that we would want them to do it. Because when you're at a pro club, kids have got 8 months, 9 months to get to the next contract. So there has to be a balance of how you get that player to the contract, or really how the player gets himself to the contract. Yeah. But you can't just say, well, we'll keep asking him questions and see if he knows. Because if he knew, he wouldn't keep making a mistake, would he? So I find that a lot of the coaches that come in, they put sessions on and they don't coach in the session. They let it go in. So they talk about let the game be the teacher. I can't actually understand that. You can't learn. The game can't teach you unless you can play it. So as you play the game, then you'll find ways in the game. You'll learn things in the game. But there'll be things that you don't know that the coach will be able to help you. Now he can do that through guided discovery, or he could do it through showing you or telling you, or whatever it may be. But they'll find different mediums of getting him through. But the game won't be the teacher if you can't play the game.
Here's one for you, Chris. This probably relates specifically to your role. How do you best manage expectations of the players and the parents and maybe supporters to a certain extent? Certainly the parents who's brought their child to you, little Johnny, at the age of 8, 9, 10, aspirations of becoming a professional footballer, see all the footballers in the Premier League, footballers on TV, want all the trimmings that come with it. How do you go about managing those expectations?
Well, it's two different ways. If you're talking about on the development side, when we were at Tottenham, it was a different scenario, because it's a different club. At QPR, we don't get the best players. So as much as, and I let the parents know that right at the beginning. So when we have our chat, basically I'm saying to them, if Arsenal or Tottenham wanted you, you wouldn't be at QPR. Simple. Because they would go. We don't ever fight for a player. So we know that the fact that we've got the player means that one of the bigger clubs hasn't taken them. So we've got quite a good reputation with what we've done. I've got some really good coaches: Paul Hall, Andy Impey, Paul Furlong, Micah Hyde. So we got some good coaches. So basically, that cohort of coaches, we've ended up with the third highest academy minutes in last season. So the reputation of the coaches speak for themselves. So if you're not wanted by one of the bigger teams, the so-called bigger teams, you leave us and you're gonna go where are you gonna go? So so I'm quite harsh with it. I'm not. If I was working at grassroots, it might be a slightly different thing. But where are you going to go? I can put the reputation of the coaches and what they've achieved on the table, and the fact that you're with us not because you want to be with us. You're with us because you've not succeeded at being scouted by one of the bigger clubs. So. We know to get a player into the first team, it's a 12-year journey from under 9. So most of the time, even if you're good, you ain't gonna make it. So I'm not really one of those who really worries if a player signs for us or not. So the coach, the parents know that we can put our reputation on the table. Not only are they good coaches and good developers, they've been professionals as well themselves. Yeah. So that's how we manage the expectations. We do an individual program, so they know that their son is being treated as an individual, not as a team. So we firstly outlined to them, look, our main mantra here is not to put out great teams. Our main mantra is to make sure that individual players get professional careers, and whether that's with us or another club, we want to give them the tools so that they can go and play for somebody else if they don't make it with us. But what we don't do is say, right, we're gonna set the teams up to go and beat a Cat 1 team or this and that and the other. We're not going to do that. We can lose. We can lose. Look, I don't want it to sound like winning's not important, because winning is important. But winning is not important at the cost of producing players.
Yeah, I'm with you. So, just on that then, Chris, is there do you have a preferred sort of playing style, a preferred system that's kind of sort of runs through the club, or it might be yourself talking about like previously at the previous academies that you worked at, a preferred way of playing? If you're talking 11 aside.
No, we look at, we don't play a system. We play a style. We don't play a system.
Okay.
So we have 7 things in our total football for development, and we go, right, having the technical excellence to carry out the demands of their task, possessing the ability to retain the ball as an individual. So they when they get it, can they sit into people? Can they keep the ball close with their advanced core skills? They have to be able to play in sophisticated possession play. So we don't want a centre half that they say, oh, he's running to midfield, but now he can't play in midfield.
Yeah.
We look at understanding the other people's roles, especially the ones that as they get up the pyramid, that like the right back, understanding the fullback's role, understanding the winger's role, etc.
Yeah.
We look at possessing the ability to take advantage of a 30 to 60 second window. So when if you have a fullback who overlaps and all of a sudden he's crossed it and they've cleared it, he doesn't have to run back to right back because the winger will drop in for him. So understanding
the relationships.
Understanding the relationships, and obviously as they get older, they need to be responsible. We want them to be expressive, but they need to be responsible as well. So that covers the whole pyramid from us, from the foundation age groups all the way to the pro levels.
Brilliant. And you mentioned some of the coaches there earlier. Some fantastic coaches, but I just wanted to ask, and we'll have some coaches here that are listening in. What do you look for in a coach, Chris, as a technical director? Yeah, what do you look for? If I was going to apply for a job at your club, what sort of key skills, core skills would you expect me to have?
I would expect a coach to come into me and be open to learning what we're doing. And I wouldn't, it's slightly different, right? The way that we run it is it's an academy. It's like a school. So we all do the same thing, or we work towards the same program. We don't, although I've got, in my opinion, very good staff, and I've worked with some really good coaches as well. I've worked with like Ozzy Abanji, Dan Manish, John McDermott, Alex Inglethorpe, Les Ferdinand, Tim Sherwood, loads of good development coaches. But we all had the same idea. I worked with Bradley Allen for a long time at Tottenham. You know, we did the 15s, 16s, and although we were different, we went down the same route. So anyone who comes into me can't come in and say, "Oh, I'm going to play like Pep, and I've got this idea and I've got that idea." No, we don't care about your idea. You come into us, and if you want to learn how to be a coach, I've got loads of coaches that will teach you how to be a coach, and you work to our philosophy, to the way that we want to work. And if you don't want to, we don't care. I'd rather have a moldable coach than one who thinks he's talented but can only work to the idea that he's got, because that's not a coach for me. Because if you want to, people talk about when you want to give coaches ideas, young coaches, not ideas, advice. I always say, be as versatile as you can. So, I've been a number 2 for many, many years of my career. And why is that? It's not because I've only worked on this philosophy. It's because whoever I work with, I can adapt to what they do. That's what being a coach is. It's about adapting to the needs of the players or the needs of the person that you're working with.
So how would you describe yourself then, Chris? You mentioned being adaptable, and I totally agree. Adaptability is a massive part. Any other sort of key things that you'd mention in terms of yourself as a coach?
Well, me personally, as a number 2 or as a sessional coach or whatever, the skill is to quickly understand what's required for the person that's putting the program into place, because you work in different programs. You might have your own way, but you're going to learn something from the different programs you work in. So you might not agree with the philosophy of a coach, but if you want to stay in the game, you better be able to work with different people. So for argument's sake, John Still, probably one of the best teachers of a philosophy I've ever worked with. And people say, well, you've done England and you've done this and you've worked at these different clubs. But what he did was every day, what he believed in, he did in training every day. Okay. And that's something, and he's been successful for years and years and years. And I really, really learned a lot about that. Well, I worked at Barnet after I got the sack at Luton. I worked there for a period of time. And I learned a lot about philosophy, not the idea, because if you look at his style of football and my style of football, they're complete polar opposites. So it's not about the idea; it's about the mode of working. And and he was brilliant. He was brilliant in how he did it. Every training session, everything that we did. I mean, listen, he was so much into his philosophy. If you took the kick off and didn't kick it long, you would come off. Literally.
I remember.
Right? So he wouldn't be having it, and I've taken that. And to be honest with you, with our coaches, that I'm similar.
Yeah.
You get a couple of chances to if you don't understand what we do, that's one thing. If you're deciding to do your own thing, then it's another thing. I mean, and people might say, well, you're taking away their creativity. What I'm doing is I'm being fair to the kids. So for argument's sake, if me and you I'm handing the players over to you, and there's elements of their game that they can't do, you can't now teach them the next part of the pyramid. You can't teach them it because they've got parts of their game missing. So a lot of the times the coaches coach for themselves. They don't realise that when you're in academy, you're in a program. You're in a program that's trying to get players to the highest level they can get to. You're not in a this is my idea, because you're coaching an idea that's based on the team. Most teams do not get into into first teams. So if you looked at Tottenham when over the past decade, and you looked at, if you started off with Jake Livermore, and then you went Stephen Corker, Ryan Mason, Andros Townsend, Adam Smith, Pritchard, obviously Harry Kane, Harry Winks. They all come from different youth teams. They don't all come from one team. So you're only going to get one or two a year that will make it into the team. If you're a good academy. So what it tells you, if you're a good academy, you're going to have a conveyor belt that has one or two a year. Now, you could be in a situation where there's a phenomenal situation like Man United, which was unbelievable, where you've got the class of 92.
Yeah.
That will never happen again in this country, where one youth team goes into the first team and then dominates the planet for
rare
15, 20 years. That's very, very rare. So when you've got an outstanding, developer like Sir Alex, and obviously he's backroom staff, because people forget, you've got people like Paul McGuinness, Eric Harrison, people like that behind the scenes that actually, Tony Whelan, people like that are there that develop the players. So people forget that the hidden developers that.
He was good at that though. When he was a master of that, he always had good number twos and knew when to, I suppose, for a better phrase, move people on and freshen up a little bit.
Exactly.
Historically, there was, I just wanted just give us an insight, and again, it can be historical, but just to the sort of offered environment of an academy, what that might look like for the coaches listening in, and certainly where you are now and what you're trying to create. Because the mental health side of things is important to me, and those on the podcast know that I talk about it quite a lot. But again, I revert back to when I was playing and what that might have looked like, probably non-existent. The player care stuff, and just to get a feel, because we talk about on pitch quite a lot, but what might it look like off field?
Our place. Well, we've got a sports. We've got a sports psychologist that works with us. It's the only one I'd ever work with, and it's Dr. Misha Jervis. She's at Brunel, and I'm not a big one into a lot of this. I see there's a lot of the psychologists that come into clubs. I don't think that they actually help. So we're continually evolving our program. She's one of the best, and she's there. She comes to the club 2 or 3 times a week and deals with the players. A lot of it pastoral, but obviously performance. She's there for performance. So she's been fantastic for us. And then we've got Janet Barr, who's our welfare officer, safeguarding. She's been brilliant as well. And then we've got our player care officer, Adam, who's come in, and he's added another dimension to our club. So we take that very, very seriously, the mental side of it, and making sure that the players feel that they've got someone to go to if there's a problem, but also if there's a problem in their performance. So next season, we're going to start it when we go back. I'm going to slightly change the way that we do things as regards the hands-on of the sports, of the psych, and I think that the psych should work with the coaches more than the players, because whatever happens, if you look at a player will be more affected by what a coach says than what a psych says. So the biggest psychologist for a player is the coach. So a psych can say whatever they want. If the coach says, if the coach isn't able to infuse the player or make the player feel that he can perform at a certain level, it's very, very, very rare that anybody else can do that, especially when they're developing. Now, obviously, the older they get, they have the stronger mind and they may be able to overcome it. But when they're developing, the coach is a massive influence on a player, and sometimes we give them to sports psychs who have no context in what the player's going through. So we can have generic psychology, which is great, but how does it help the player perform? Because when it all boils down to it, at the end of the day, what does a player want to be? The player wants to be a first-team player.
Yeah.
So we can have pastoral care, which I agree with. We need to do that, but we've also got to realise why the players even come to the club in the first place. Players come to the club to be a footballer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So a lot of the times we have generic psychology that is pastoral, which is great for mental health and great for just general keeping everybody acting in a civil manner. But how can we be more skillful in getting that performance right and getting the care right? That's a balance I don't see happening very often. So we're going to try and change that. We're going to increase the amount of time that the coaches spend learning about psychological matters and how the coach can actually impart that on the players. But it's important that the psychologists, anybody who comes into work with us, we immediately try and put them on their level 2, so they understand football. Yeah. So whether it be a female employee or a male employee, we try to make sure that they understand the philosophy. So if they don't understand the philosophy, they don't work with us.
Okay. Chris, last couple from me, and then we go over to Rich, who's filled in a few questions for you. The first one for me is about reflection, really, and how high you place that in your sort of job role as technical director, and also in your other roles, because we talk a lot now about sort of plan, do, review, and I think about myself as a coach, and certainly when I first started, even in the sessions with the external factors of parents and people watching it, I didn't want to make a mistake. So certainly in that moment, I probably wouldn't have blamed myself, and I wouldn't have reflected on it. Now, after a session, I make sure that I reflect, and also reflect, the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. How could I improve as a coach? How high do you place something like that, Chris?
Well, what we do is all the players have a journal.
Yeah.
And what they do is they write the sessions down. And most of the sessions, we have a different way of the way that we speak. They can abbreviate the sessions quickly, so it's not a bugbear for them. The coaches have a journal as well. In the players' journal, whatever session they do, there has to be what was in it for me section. So if you're doing crossing, and that's what you want to do, but you've got the defenders coming in. A lot of times we have them going out slowly at 50%, or this and that and the other, or we're more concentrating on the forwards. So to set each player has their own job description and their individual plans of what they need to work on every day. So what they can say is, right, if I was working on, you was working on crossing, but I was the defender, you didn't really talk to me, I should know I need to get out there, I need to bend my knees, and I need to show you one direction. What sort of tackling am I going to do? So what parts of my job description did I work on? Was it communication? Was it getting out there quickly? What was my physical attributes I worked on? Was it acceleration, deceleration? What? So that should be in the players' journals. So we should know that. We should be able to pick them up randomly. If we said we did a session, that it shouldn't be that session is focused on that player. That player should know what he's working on in that session, and we should know it as well. So that means if we don't perform fantastically in the session as coaches, which let's face it, if you was to grade yourself all the time, honestly, you know that you can't. The players don't perform fantastically all the time. But what you have to do is give them, so they are working and training themselves. When you're not doing well, they're doing well for themselves. So what we try and do then is also give the coaches that reflection. They have a journal, and they reflect in the journal.
Brilliant.
So apart from doing the PMA, which is very laborious, the coaches should have it, and they should be writing down little notes on players all the time. They should be writing down little. So when they go to write their reviews on the players, they might think. A lot of times, what happens with players, the player who's doing well in the last month usually gets the contract. So someone can do well for 8 months and have a bad month, and then they don't get a contract. So we have league tables all the time where the players go up and down the league tables all the time. So someone who's a no or in October could quite easily be a yes by April.
Yes.
He would have moved up, he would have moved down, he would have moved up. But the person who's a no in April, we might still take because he's been a yes for 6 months. He's just had a bad knee, or he's not done well, or for some reason outside football he hasn't performed well. So we have to get that level of consistency. So we're always reviewing the players all the time. We're always reviewing any little bits of cultural or personality or non-football related stuff. We're always sharing that with people, you know, who's been to a funeral, hasn't been to a funeral, who's done well at school, who's you know, playing another sport. We're sharing that. We try and share that all the time. So all the coaches are sort of informed about that person, about the player. So one of the things that we introduced before was about understanding. I haven't really been as harsh as I was in the beginning on it, but the coaches used to have to know what the kids ate, what they were watching on telly.
Yeah.
So for the connection with the players. So, you know, if I had my way, which I will do when I go back, they will have to probably log something on a weekly basis. So we know things like just coming out like, was it tick tock tock tick, whatever it is, you know, we know what it is.
TikTok.
You know, so you can. I'm not saying that you have to be the oldest swinger in town, but you have to understand what's going on in their mind. So
no, that's this is. And you're not the only one, Chris. We've done a few of these interviews now, and it just keeps coming back to people before players. And you know, I think there's a story of a manager in the league who's one of his players' wife gave birth, and I think a lot of the players didn't even know that she was pregnant. And how does that work? This players in our team, and we don't know these sort of like minor details, but even those things, and it's great that we've got these coaches listening in now, but as a minimum, knowing the teams that your players support, just a little bit about them, some sort of connection as they come through the gate, I think is paramount. Chris, last one from me before we go to Rich is you mentioned a few coaches there, but just really want to get an idea of who you admire, sort of current day, really.
Believe it or not, I admire the developers like Justin Cochran and Paul Hall, and you know, people like that, and the people and the coaches that I've got at my place. I've got some good young coaches coming up, like Manisha. You've got Akin Lord. You've got Lee Ban Muird, and you've got Lee Hayes. They're in my thing. I've got some good coaches in and around. And obviously the ones that I mentioned before. So I'm on the EHOC. So there's some good coach developers on that. So I admire the developers more than, listen, obviously you got to admire the top coaches, because more from the point of view that managing those superstars, I think, is a very, very difficult scenario. You know, and I had a touch of it when I was involved at QPR when we was in the Premier League, and you know, you got you know, dressing rooms with Rio Ferdinand and Joey Barton and people like that in it. So I understand how hard it is to manage people at that level. But the developers, for me, you know, are paramount to the future of the game. So if you looked at, you know, Arsenal got a couple of good ones, Dan Vanish and Danny Buck, and then Ozzy Abanji, who I've worked with. Everybody knows that. And obviously, I worked with John McDermott and Alex Inglethorpe, Perry Suckling at Tottenham. You know, you're talking about top developers. Do you know what I mean? When you're looking at coaches, so I think the developers for me are more important, because it takes time, it takes patience, and to get success, is much harder than anything else, because you have to stick at it. You have to stick at it, and you've got to be patient, and you've got to understand that there's times where Alex Inglethorpe always used to talk about silver medalists. You know, people always look at the gold medalist at 9 and don't realise that he burnt out by 12, 13. Sort of understanding the strive of how players strive. And I look at the developers, and I admire them more than the actual managers of teams, even though I know it's difficult.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. And I think sometimes people, when they ask that, expect a conventional answer like a Klopp or a Mourinho or someone. But I said to you, Chris, yesterday when we spoke, we had Gareth Ainsworth on here, someone I'm sure you know, and just blew my mind really, with just the way that he was, his ideas on the game, his philosophy, his people skills, the way that he gets other players to manage the dressing room, and then all that being said, where they are in the league versus budgets, and also him being like the longest serving manager. So
he's done brilliant.
Certainly,
he's really. I admire what they've got down there. They've done really well.
Yeah.
Really well.
Yeah.
I mean, they worked with Misha Jervis for a period of time. She put a lot of their, not a lot, but she influenced a little bit of their the way that they act down there within their culture, and I think that the innocence of what they do, but the professionalism of what they do, I think it's going to be. I hope it doesn't get lost because eventually they'll go and have to manage higher, or their team will go higher, and then you get the people in there that earn more money. Therefore, a lot of the times they listen less. What they've got there is, I think every manager in the league would want their culture.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Right, Chris, thank you. Richard, are you there with some questions? Here he comes.
I'm there. How are you?
Pretty good. Yeah,
thanks, Chris, for that. I've got a couple of questions. First up from Nick, who posted his question signing up. He said, I've heard from previous podcasts that you place a higher priority on player development than results. At what age does this change in your mind? And also, how do you deal with parents that just want to see the results?
Well, there's no age that it changes. It depends on on who they've got in their cohort. So, for argument's sake, if you've got at Tottenham, our first development squad was Carl Walker, Stephen Corker, Carl Norton, Danny Rose, Jake Livermore, Ryan Mason, Andros Townsend, John Bostock and John Abika, subs, Harry Kane, Adam Smith, Tom Carroll. At that stage, you're expecting to win the game. It's a different level of player, right? But most of the times, if you're going to only want the result, you're going to do that at the cost of letting people express themselves and make mistakes. So it's based on the quality of the cohort that you've got. It will depend whether we think you should win games or not. Because ultimately, the higher up the pyramid they have to understand that winning is an art as well. Gamesmanship is important, stuff like that. When to slow the game down, when to speed it up. So it really depends on the quality of that. In development, I never care about the result ever, ever, because that's not winning for me. Isn't that winning for me? Is players getting pro contracts, and winning for me is seeing the players run out at Loftus Road, at the Klein Prince Stadium, not Loftus Road, Klein Prince Stadium. That's winning for me.
No, that's interesting, mate. Thank you. Elliot asks, Chris, you're a big advocate for receiving, retaining, and releasing skills being crucial in the foundation phase. What would be the key things to include in a session to hit these areas?
What in the foundation phase?
Yes, yeah.
Well, we never release any under nines.
Oh, sorry, just to go to the question. So big advocate for receiving, retaining, and releasing skills. I think it means around the ball. Crucial in the foundation phase. Yeah. What would be the key things to include in a session to target these areas?
Basically, we have little drills that encourage them to do it. Passing, we have different passing drills, and then we try and mix we try and quickly get the passing drills into free play, and then take it back, and then and then we mix it. We mix it quite a bit. We got special. So we got stock practices at the club. So the stock practices everybody does, and they do it based on capability and where they are on the pyramid. So our practices lend themselves to the kids receiving the ball. So everyone has to do the same one. It can't be like I come in and do one, you do one different. So we think the better they know the practice, the more creative they can be in the practice. So a lot of the times what happens is you think of most coaches. If I gave you a group of players to coach today, you didn't know the players. By the time you taught them something they never knew, they're only going to learn it by the end of the session, aren't they? Mm-hmm. So what we do then is we say, we've got to do another session next week, a new one. So they're only ever learning the session within 10 minutes. So what we do is we repeat the sessions all the time. And then what you do then is we call it PAV. So it's progression, additions and variations, and we have loads of those on the sessions. So when the players are ready to move within that session, we've got the next bit. So that's how we really encourage them to receive the ball. We just loads of repetition of the same thing.
That's really interesting, because I suppose maybe I'm talking on behalf of many grassroots coaches here, but you probably might change session to session. But that's interesting about the stock sessions and trying to get that repetitive and getting to learn the game. I like that. Liam asks, hi Chris, what would you say is the most common attribute in children and make it to the next level?
Yeah, to the next level so in children. So I would imagine if you're saying to the next level, that's probably 15, 16 when they get their scholarship. For the coaches have to make the sessions when they start getting to that positional refinement where they're going into developing expertise. The coaches have to make the sessions bespoke, because they have to go in not as an expert yet, but they're developing expertise when they go into the club. So you can't have a player that hasn't got any attributes that are worth signing. You can't go there with a player so that's why we talk about working on their signature strengths and celebrating them. Because if you go in as a fullback, as a midfield player, okay, you're going to have certain skills that take you to that next level. So the coaches can't just say, right, everyone plays everywhere. What you do is you start off with that, and as it goes further up the pyramid, they get to be to a more bespoke part of the pitch, and then you develop their expertise there. If the coach doesn't do that, the player hasn't got no field geography, doesn't really understand where they are on the pitch, doesn't understand the skills of playing that position, and then they just become a part player.
Good advice again, thank you. One final question is from Asif. He says, what advice would you give to a grassroots club trying to get away from a winning mentality towards a more learning individual mentality, and what helps and hinders that process?
Well, first of all, it depends on your club. So what is your club? Is the club that you are, is that why the players go there? So you have to understand the motive for the players going to the club. So some grassroots players don't ever want to be footballers. They just want to win the medal. So there's a social side to it that is important. They like the end of the season, medals being handed out by the celebrity and all that. So what's the motive of the club that you're in? If the motive for the club that you're in is that they just want to have the celebrity giving out the medals at the end of the season, there's nothing wrong with that, because not everyone's going to be a footballer. Mm-hmm. If the motive of the club is to give the players the best possible chance to be a professional footballer, then you have to explain it to the parents that experimentation is a major part of getting better. So then when they experiment and lose the ball and the other team score, if by 2 or 3 games time they've learned that they need to check their shoulder, or they've learned that that's the wrong time to receive it there, or this and that and the other, they're going to start moving within their levels, within their potential. Then they've got a chance of going into an academy. Then they've got the chance of moving up. So it's quickly understanding what the club's about first, or what the ethos of the club is, what the parents bring the players there for.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you again. Over to Mr. Rivers. I think he's got one final question, Mark.
I have got one final one. Yeah, again, looking at the coaches on here, if you've got one piece of advice, Chris, for those coaches that may have aspirations of working in an academy, what would that advice be?
I would say at the moment, I think coaches are too tactical. All they think about is tactics. Oh, we played with this formation and that formation and this and that and the other. That doesn't improve the player, the individual. So tactics are easy to learn, easy to learn. But in actually coaching and coaching a player to improve, I think I think people need to understand that, and understanding. If, for argument's sake, if you were to say to a coach now, right, teach someone how to clip the ball, they probably wouldn't know. Yeah. They wouldn't know how to break it down. They wouldn't be talking about your approach, where your standing leg is, how you swing your arms, where you strike the ball. They wouldn't know. They just put the practice on and just tell them to clip it. They wouldn't talk about ball feel, about dropping it in with one bounce or two bounces. They wouldn't do that. So learn how to coach. To me, if you're going to come to us, learn how to teach, shall I say? Because a coach is a teacher. So my advice would be, one, be versatile to different people that you work with. Two, really learn how to teach techniques. Will make you valuable to players.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, Chris, thank you very much for your time. I know you're a busy person, but I'm sure our coaches have got loads out of this. So, yeah, thank you. And, yeah, at some point I'll pop down to the training ground. We can catch up properly.
Anytime. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Cheers, Chris.